Well, I'd just like to welcome everyone here today. We're out here on the Stead Road in the beautiful District 18 Rustico Emerald, where I'm proud to be the MLA. And I'm joined here by advocates, including Tamara Paparoni DeVries, who's the owner of this property. Thank you for letting us be here. And June Ellis, who's the Executive Director of the Residential Rental Association of PEI. And together, we're here to launch the public consultations on proposed amendments to the Residential Tenancy Act. Now, these amendments are the result of, so far, a lot of feedback from tenants, landlords, and legal experts. As you may recall, I was Minister of Housing at one point. I was the minister primarily that had the new Residential Tenancy Act developed under my watch, and so I was there for all of the initial consultations on that. But these amendments, I really feel, are here with the aim to improve fairness, transparency, and efficiency in our rental housing system. And it's an effort to keep our most affordable rental units and encourage more rental units in general. That is, let's make sure that landlords have a reason to stay in business. So we're proposing the creation of a new Office of Residential Tenancy Services with an independent advisor office for both the tenant and the landlord, two separate offices, to improve implementation, enforcement, and access to justice. And it's important to note that IRAC will still continue to hear appeals, but with a much clearer separation of roles. We're also introducing a unified rent increase formula that's transparent and evidence-based, which will allow landlords to recover costs while, very importantly, still protecting tenants through phased-in increases and specific support measures that the Act designates. Also, eviction rules will be more balanced, especially for personal use cases, with tiered notice periods and compensation based on tenancy length. We're also strengthening enforcement tools for payment orders and inspection rights. Some other reforms include really encouraging pet-friendly housing by introducing an optional pet damage deposit, facilitating heating system conversions, both to reduce costs for tenants and landlords, and emissions, of course, and shifting responsibility for abandoned tenant property from landlords to the director, and really easing the burden on landlords and really providing even better protections for tenant property. And these changes are designed to reflect the realities of today's rental market while protecting both the rights of tenants and landlords. So it's really important. We want to hear from you, and we invite all islanders to participate in the consultation process. Your feedback will really help shape the final legislation. In fact, as the feedback comes in, I will definitely consider changing the proposed amendments. And if you go to my website, bradtrivers.com, you'll see it's very obvious where to find the RTA amendments there. I will continuously update the proposed amendments based on the feedback being had. And you'll be able to look at old versions of the amendments, see the new versions, and we'll tweak them, because this really is a discussion. This isn't about me telling you what should be done. This is about me listening to you and making sure we make the changes that will make the system the best it can be. We'll have some public consultations in person. Next week we have a couple of town halls, one in Summerside. We're working to get one in Charlottetown as well. And the Greater Charlottetown Chamber of Commerce is having a coffee chat as well next Thursday morning. So I've said a lot here, but these advocates here at the table beside me would like to add why they believe amendments are required to the Residential Tenancy Act. And I'll first ask Tamara Paparoni DeVries to speak.
Hi, thank you, Brad. I guess I would like to start with the fact that after going public about my situation, it was very real to see the amount of people that were in a very similar position than mine. So my case, yes, it was probably exaggerated compared to other people. However, I'm not unique. And what I'm hearing is that landlords are saying, we're done with this and I'm selling my property, or I have sold my property already because I can't go through another bad tenant. In my case, I was approached by 3 students that needed a home closer to university, and they said their mother was going to come and live with them, and it ended up being 10 children and 2 parents, plus 2 dogs and 12 cats, which meant that the agreement that we had was broken from the very beginning, and there was no reason that it took 5 months for me to evict them. So if we could just shorten the hearing times as well as the processing time, I would have been able to evict them much sooner, and I wouldn't have $90,000 in damages and $10,000 lawyer fees and the headaches and the stress that we went through as a family for 5 months straight. So it would be important that we shorten the process, we become more efficient, and that we have a fairness in the system where we share the same amount of responsibilities and rights. And I think that's the change that landlords are looking for.
Well, thank you, Tamara. And just to reiterate, this is a beautiful property you have here. And it's my understanding that, like so many landlords, you were renting this really just until you wanted to move in yourself and make this kind of your final forever home. Yeah. And are you still planning to move back in?
Yes, I'm actually moving in a few weeks. We're definitely gonna be doing a lot of renovations as we stay here, but thankfully we have 2 teenage sons that are willing to help out.
That was great news, great news. Now the other person we have at the table here is the Executive Director of the Residential Rental Association of PEI. And this was an association that actually was formed as a result of the original consultation process on the new Residential Tenancy Act. That's a couple of years old now, well, almost 3. And they really felt that landlords didn't have a coordinated voice and needed to talk. So I'm going to turn this over to June Ellis, the Executive Director.
Thank you very much, Brad. I'm glad to be here today to represent the Residential Rental Association. And we do welcome these new amendments for sure. It's long overdue. We've been pounding away for a number of years trying to get some changes. And one of the biggest things is fair market rent on turnover. What we're seeing is a lot of small landlords, they're just leaving the business altogether because they just cannot make a living with these properties because the rents are just too low, and they continue to be too low. Even when a tenant moves out, they cannot raise them. We have some landlords that their property is only about $600 a month, and that's not covering the expenses. So I hear it continuously that they're leaving, and we do have bigger landlords that hold a lot of property that have just left the business as well. Their quote is, they find PEI is the hardest province to do business in. There's too many restrictions. It's the only province in Canada that does not allow fair market value on turnover. And that is one thing that we are pounding away, and we continue to pound away, that we need that. And we need more respect in the area through more respect with media, more respect with tenants. They cannot destroy property. It's the landlord's property, and people tend to forget that. It's not the tenant's property. It's the landlord's property. And they need to be respected as the tenants are respected as well. So we're pounding away, like I keep repeating that, and we still have a lot more to do, and I hope with these new amendments that things are going to change, and we need quicker responses from Island Regulatory and Appeals Commission and the rental office. Thank you very much.
Well, thank you, June. And as you go through the proposed amendments, you'll find they're quite lengthy, and they cover a broad range of things. And I really tried to find a balance for tenants and landlords. my initial inclination was to simply allow the rent to be reset to whatever value, market value, on turnover when it was vacant. But I've tempered that, and I've restructured the entire rent increase framework. So it's not giving landlords full reign to just increase the price to whatever they want, but it's allowing for an increase that actually matches expenses and takes into account other discretionary measures that the director feels are appropriate. So we're going to have some good discussions, let's say, and I really am here to listen and make these the best I can. So that said, please do go to bradtrivers.com, go to the RTA amendments page. There's a form there, and it's like in a survey type format. It goes through every amendment and basically asks, do you agree with changes, do you disagree, or do you not have an opinion? There's, 18 or 20 of those sections, and I'd really like it, even if you're interested in one specific section, just click on no opinion if you need to go through the others. So with that, I'd like to invite the media here to ask any questions you might have.
So Stu Neatby with Guardian.
Okay, this is Stu Neatby with the Guardian, Saltwire.
Maybe just a question to June. Sorry. Thank you. Just a question for you, June. I was wondering, do you have any numbers? I guess, like I've heard that there's often talk, anecdotally, of landlords who are getting out of renting properties because of how the tenancy system works. How many have you come across in the last year? Like, do you have any idea of, like, how many landlords you know have gotten out of the business because of how it works here?
I don't have the exact numbers, I'm sorry, but there are quite a few that contact me very often to say that they're getting out because it's just not feasible for them. And I do welcome some of the changes that Brad's putting forward.
Brad, I was just wondering if you could elaborate a little bit on, I guess, the Office of Residential Tenancy Services. So would this be something like Dow Legal Aid in Halifax, only with sort of separate offices for tenants and landlords?
Thanks, Stu. So what the issues we're running into, it's a perceived conflict of interest between IRAC, which is the appeal body, and the rental office that is within IRAC that has the same reporting structure. And so what we want to do is move that rental office entity completely outside of IRAC and have them basically manage the act the way they do right now within IRAC, but completely at arm's length. And then IRAC would still hear the appeals. So this what is it, ORTS, Office of Residential Tenancy Services, would provide that. But most importantly, kind of like the Workers' Compensation Board, there's an Office of the Worker Advisor and an Office of the Employer Advisor. We want, my suggestion is we have an Office of the Landlord Advisor and an Office of the Tenant Advisor. So these are people who understand the Residential Tenancy Act and regulations inside out. They're sitting outside of IRAC, and ideally they have a legal background, and then they can help for free advise tenants and landlords to navigate their way through the structure. Make sure just like some of the key pieces are in place because not all landlords or tenants know they have to be there. Like a tenancy agreement needs to always be signed, and it should have specific parts. And hopefully, given as they're set up, both this Office of Residential Tenancy Services and these two advisor offices, they'll develop mechanisms for better enforcement of the rules and regulations as well. And I'm sure we'll talk about some of the methods for that enforcement in the feedback as well.
To add to that as well, I think the two offices would be a very educational piece for both the landlords and the tenants, because often landlords don't know all the ins and outs of it, and the same as tenants. So it would be a very good educational process.
So, making sure I have this right. So the idea is that IRAC would still hear the appeals, but there would be a separate office that kind of advises tenants and landlords, but is also has a role kind of adjudicating the act?
There's three offices. There's the Office of Residential Tenancy Services, that's responsible for the initial adjudication of the act. IRAC hears appeals. The Office of the Landlord Advisor and Office of the Tenant Advisor are completely separate entities that operate on their own, not under the auspices of the Office of the Residential Tenancy Services.
Maybe a last one for me. Can you elaborate a little bit more on how you think the rent framework should work and how it would differ from how things work right now? Yes.
And I'll take that one. So this is one that, again, I struggled with a little bit in the beginning. The inclination was to make it very simple, right? Keep the current regulations and legislation when a unit is occupied for greater than allowable rent increases, but on vacancy, allow the rent just to be reset to whatever value, market value the landlord seem fit. But the more I dug into it, the more feedback I got, the more people said it should be limited somewhat, at least to reasonable rates, market rates. How do you define that? Right now, there's IRAC has had to develop their own way to determine, what's a reasonable rate of return on a property. So I wanted to take the guesswork out of things, and I wanted to look at very, very much what are the expenses involved with running the property and how have they increased in the recent term. In particular, property taxes and insurance, but also capital improvements, right? And there should be an ability to pass at least some of those expenses on to tenants if you're a landlord. And so I've tried to find a reasonable balance. The limits on a 3% greater than allowable increase, the feedback I got was that was just simply too low. I'm proposing to move that to 10% at this point, again pending feedback. One thing also I heard from landlords was for them to provide the entire ins and outs, all the details of their business, including their rate of return, to IRAC and then have it available essentially to the tenants was something they felt was a breach of confidentiality. So I've got amendments in there to improve on that as well, so that IRAC can still share information with the tenants about the landlord's finances, but don't have to give the full detailed information. So those are some examples.
It'd be easier for our purposes to clip you audio-wise, but I can ask questions.
Yeah, go ahead, Cody. We're doing a live stream. We can reiterate afterwards if we need to.
Introduce yourself. Yeah, so it's Cody with CBC News. How would you characterize this in terms of how it protects landlords and tenants?
Well, the key thing right now, and this has been highlighted many times, is we have a very low vacancy rate on PEI. We're at, I believe in late 2024, December 2024, we were still at 0.8%, right? Which means if you're a tenant and you're looking for a new place to live, you don't have a lot of options. In particular, when it comes to the affordable units, which of course are the ones that have been under rent control the longest, which are the older units. If those go away and you're a tenant looking for a place to live, you're really in a hard place, especially if you're low income, right? I think our government has done a great job of building new rental units. We've saw record housing starts, but they're frankly at a much higher rental cost. So the way it's protecting tenants is we want to keep these older affordable units around. We don't want landlords saying, look, I need to raise the rent to a reasonable amount for me to keep these open, but I can't, so I'm selling them, I'm getting out of the business, and we're removing those affordable units from the market. Maybe it's converting to condominiums, maybe it's selling the building for another purpose, or saying, look, I don't have the money I need to really do the maintenance and repair work that I need to do on this building that I own. I got a 10-unit building, and I just can't afford to spend any money, so sorry, Mr. or Mrs. Tenant, you're just going to have to live with that carpet that's ripped up in the corner. You're going to have to live with various other repairs that need to be done. So that's how it's going to help tenants. It's really, this is the core of the act. It's going to keep affordable housing on the market. It may be a little bit less affordable, but at least it'll be there. And it'll help landlords because, I mean, landlords in my, my discussions, their goal is to really provide a service to their tenants. And landlords, to a person, have said they work hard to make sure they give a good experience to the tenants, they provide good housing to their tenants. And many landlords over the years haven't even taken the allowed increases, right? And up until we saw the property assessments go really wild in the last 5 to 10 years, and now property taxes have gone up, and now they can't actually, make their venture viable. So it's going to help landlords continue to offer the services they want to offer, while at the same time keeping these affordable housing units for tenants. Anyone else want to add to that?
I just want to say that hit it on the head. That's exactly what we're wanting as well.
And I would say one little thing that I've seen over the years in my line of work is that a lot of people that have been renting for long periods of time, especially a single family home outside of Charlottetown, what you see is that they go a different direction and they decide to Airbnb instead of doing long term. You don't have to deal with bad tenants necessarily, and two, you're definitely making way more money.
Really good point, Tamara.
One thing that you had mentioned was it may be less affordable. So landlords are obviously looking for a reasonable rate of return, tenants looking for a home, but it becomes less affordable for them. How could they afford some units where prices go up? Because when it comes to fair market value, as you described in the amendments, there's a catch-up cost there if it's significantly low. Like, let's say they're paying $600 a month, and that's just not making ends meet for landlords. So if that's now raised 20%, as was mentioned in the amendments, or more, now if they're living paycheck to paycheck, they're not being able to match that. But also the landlord is not getting what they are sinking their cost into for the unit.
No, and this is the crux of the issue. So let's say you have a $1,000 a month unit, and it goes up by 20%, $200. Well, first of all, when you get into the details of this, first of all, landlords do still have to justify that, and it's directly related to the expenses that are incurred or capital improvements that are made, but also it's still phased in. And so in this case, maybe it's 20% over 2 years, so it goes from 1,000 to 1,100 to 1,200. But most importantly, and this is sometimes, all tenants get painted with the same brush. Like, all tenants are low income, they're struggling to make ends meet, and they don't have enough money to pay rent, which is not the case. There's lots of people who are choosing to rent for various reasons. They could be students, they could decide they just don't want to own a house yet, maybe they're saving for a down payment, and frankly, they can afford modest increases. And the people who are low income, who truly cannot afford those rent increases, we have government programs to help them, of course, which I won't get into here today, but in the amendments, what I'm suggesting is that we mandate in the legislation tenant support for those cases where they can't afford the rents. So it's help the people who need help, keep the affordable rental units on the market, and do modest increases for the people we know can afford them.
So one of the amendments in there was that if a tenant breaks a lease and is behind on their payments, there could be a court order to garnish their wages or take their wages in some way from their employers. So where does that fit into schemes? Like, where do you draw that from in terms of legislation, and where does that come from if it's inspired by another province?
Well, thank you. And the details are important, and that's the tough thing about these kind of detailed legislative changes. So in those cases, first of all, the bar to get to that point, I've tried to set in the legislative amendments as being fairly high. Like, this doesn't mean you're late for, one rent payment and suddenly you find your wages are being garnished. You can look at the details of exactly what those criteria are, but it's a situation that would be used hopefully not very often, and only in cases where it was really an issue. In terms of precedents from other jurisdictions, I'll have to get back to you on that one. Yeah.
Okay. One of the landlords here at the table, sorry. one of the landlords here at the table, as well as other landlords, have said that they deal with a lot of problem tenants or bad tenants, and there could be bad landlords as well. But when it comes to bad tenants, there's a lot of costs there in reconstructing the property or fixing it or in any sort of way. So a lot of that, how does that all fit into the amendments that you're proposing? Because there are movements there for property that is left over when a tenant is evicted or leaves the property.
So if I'm interpreting your question correctly, for example, I mean, Tamara's case would be an extreme example of where a tenant was in and caused, just an unbelievable amount of damage. I think you were saying $80,000, $90,000 worth of damage. So if Tamara, there's two pieces. One is if she intends to rent again, she can do capital improvements, and she can apply for a greater than allowable increase, taking those into account. And you'll see the specifics on how those are calculated here. Again, I think I'm going to get feedback. Tenants will say it's too much, and landlords will say it's too little, but we need to find a solution probably somewhere in the middle. In the case where, and I believe this is the case here, the landlord wants to move into the property themselves, or they want to sell it. Really, it's about finding a way for them to apply a penalty to the tenant that above and beyond what they can get through small claims court. And I think I said it's up to $5,000 penalty if you destroy a place, and then you move out and you're on the hook for that. Now, in practical terms, how hard is that to enforce? This is why it's so important, I think, that we have the Office of the Tenant Advisor and Office of the Landlord Advisor. They can give legal advice, they can help people out, and really they can create a situation where both the tenant and the landlord win in the end. Well, thank you. There's a number of people here. Really thank both the Guardian and CBC for attending. If there's anyone else that had any particular questions you wanted to ask today, feel free to come take the mic. And other than that, I did want to close to say that one of the big tenant advocacy groups is the PEI Fight for Affordable Housing, and I do look forward to talking with them. I mean, I've heard them at standing committee and read their submissions, and I've tried to use that to, advise my amendments. But I think there's a lot more conversations to be had with tenant advocacy groups as well, and I look forward to that. Hope to see you as we go through this consultation process. Thank you and have a great day. Oh yeah, that's a good question. I didn't set a deadline yet, but if I want to get bills ready for the Legislative Assembly, I got to get legislative announcement on time.
For like
private members. So I'm thinking probably like the end of September, early October.
Okay, so you're going to start consultations next week publicly, and then that just goes right up until Ledge starts, essentially.
Well, Ledge starts November.
November, yeah, okay.
So it'll go end of September, and that'll give a month